The Bible. It's a collection of ancient texts, prophecies, poetry, history, and letters. It holds stories of kings, shepherds, wars, and miracles. But for many, the Bible remains an unopened mystery. Here at The Bible Explained, we're not just reading verses, we're exploring the cultural bedrock and the dramatic narrative woven through its 66 books. Hit that subscribe button and let the journey begin.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are jumping into one of the most consequential figures in all of human history, Abraham.
Yeah, and it's almost impossible to overstate his importance.
Right.
When you look at the major monotheistic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which is, over 3 billion people worldwide, you are fundamentally looking at the results of the covenant God made with Abraham.
And it wasn't just some simple agreement.
No, not at all. It was this profound, really detailed blueprint. It involved a seed, a land, and this idea of a universal blessing.
And those ancient terms, they're not just historical footnotes, are they? They are actively shaping global politics, our societies, even culture today.
Absolutely. You can't really grasp the deep-rooted tensions in so many modern conflicts, like the Arab-Israeli conflict, for instance, without appreciating the religious history behind it all. It's a contested heirship.
So that's our mission to this deep dive. We're going to clarify what the covenant's terms actually were, explore some surprising historical debates about where Abraham even came from, and then compare how these three great traditions interpret their shared patriarch. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really understand the commitment, we have to start with the context. We're talking about Abram. This is before his name was changed, around 1900 BCE.
Right.
And the biblical narrative starts his journey with his father, Terah, in a place called Ur of the Chaldees, or Ur-Kasdim, way over in Mesopotamia.
And what we see right away is that this family was on the move. I mean, their first journey was a massive trek.
Oh, yeah.
Something like 600 miles or 950 kilometers straight up the Euphrates River to a city called Haran, where they settle for a while.
And Abram only continues the rest of the journey down into Canaan much later, maybe around 1855 BCE, after he gets that direct divine call.
But that starting point you mentioned, Ur of the Chaldees, that's where a really big historical puzzle begins, isn't it?
It is. For centuries, scholars have been debating where this Ur actually was.
So tell us about that, because there are these two major competing theories, and they have huge geographical implications.
They really do. So the long-standing consensus, this was driven by archaeology in the early 20th century, identifies Ur with the great Sumerian city of Ur.
Yeah.
Today it's called Tel el-Muqayyar. It's deep in lower Mesopotamia, way down near the Persian Gulf, a major economic and political hub. If Abraham came from there, he came from the center of civilization.
But that location, it creates some pretty significant problems for the traditional route, doesn't it?
It does.
Because traveling from that southern Ur all the way up to Haran and then back down into Canaan is a colossal detour. Yeah. It's over 1,000 miles. It just makes no logistical sense if Canaan was the goal.
Exactly. And there's another textual challenge in the sources. The book of Joshua says that Abraham's ancestors lived beyond the river.
Beyond the river.
Right. And if you're standing in Canaan looking east, the southern Ur is technically not beyond the Euphrates. It's on the same side, at least if you're following the main trade routes.
That is a critical distinction. So this is where the northern theory comes in to solve that puzzle.
It does. The northern theory argues for a location like, say, Urkesh, which is much further north in Mesopotamia. It fits neatly into the region the Bible calls Aram Naharaim, the homeland of the Arameans.
And that location would be beyond the river.
Perfectly. It also makes the stop at Haran a logical restaurant point on a standard trade route south, not this massive, out-of-the-way detour.
And this is where the historical record adds a really surprising layer. We looked at some sources that mention cuneiform evidence, the clay tablets from the 19th century BCE, Abraham's exact era.
And what's on those tablets is an official in Urkesh named Teru, the man of Urkesh.
The name is an almost exact match for the biblical Terah.
It's a striking parallel. And the connection, it might run deeper than just the name. The political context described suggests that this official, Teru, was a prominent guy, but he was actively hated by the local Hurrian population.
Which gives us crucial context for why the family might have left.
Yes. Classical traditions suggest Terah's family was despised in Ur-Kasdim because they stood against idol worship. Some even say Terah made and sold idols for a living.
So if he was politically prominent, but his family was, let's say, spiritually unpopular, it makes that sudden call to leave the security of a city like Urkesh totally understandable.
It transforms the narrative from a simple migration into a flight from either religious or political persecution.
And think about the destination. Haran was a thriving city, but Abram was called to leave that comfort for Canaan, which the sources describe as an underdeveloped backwater.
The whole journey was about separation, starting completely fresh.
So that context, it really sets the stage for the core of these three faiths,
Yeah.
the Abrahamic Covenant itself. When God calls Abram, what are the fundamental promises made in Genesis 12?
You can really boil them down to three foundational elements. First, the promise of nationhood and offspring, to make him a great nation with just countless descendants. The seed. Second, the land grant, the specific, detailed gift of the land of Canaan.
And third?
And third, the most expansive one, the universal blessing, that all peoples on earth will be blessed through you.
And that phrase, that blessing extending to all nations, that's what makes this so globally significant. Now, the nature of this promise, it leads to a big theological discussion. Was this covenant conditional or unconditional?
It's a key point, because the ceremony in Genesis 15 seems to strongly favor the unconditional view, at least for the promise itself.
How so?
Well, think of it like a legal contract. In that ceremony, Abram cuts these animals in two, but when it's time to seal the deal, God alone, represented by a smoking oven and a flaming torch, passes between the pieces.
And Abraham is asleep. He's passive.
Exactly. He's in a deep sleep. So God takes on the solitary, unbreakable obligation to fulfill the promise of the seed and the land. He even uses the phrase, "I will," 5 times. It's very emphatic.
Okay, so the core contract is unilaterally guaranteed. But then why does God seem to tie the blessings to Abraham's actions later on?
That's the nuance. While the promise of the seed and land is guaranteed, the timing and the actual experience of those blessings are often tied directly to obedience.
Like bonuses in the contract.
That's a great way to put it. For example, the ultimate oath confirming the promises in Genesis 22 happens only after Abraham has shown total obedience by offering Isaac. His faithfulness didn't earn the promise, but it determined when and how fully it would be activated.
And moving from the concept to the practice, God gives a physical, lasting sign of this membership in Genesis 17. Brit Milah, the covenant of circumcision.
An essential ritual, a lifelong mark of membership, and it's commanded to be done specifically on the 8th day.
And that timing is important.
Very. It distinguishes it from other ancient puberty rites. It marks it as a sign of God's election, a dedication made in infancy.
And that ritual is still a foundational cornerstone today, often performed by a mohel, or in more progressive streams of Judaism, a molet.
Absolutely. The covenant also involved that famous renaming of Abram and Sarai. Abram, exalted father, becomes Abraham, father of a multitude.
And Sarai, my princess, becomes Sarah, simply princess.
And what's fascinating there is that tiny, silent addition of the letter H, the Hebrew letter He, into both names.
Why is that so significant?
Well, linguistically, the insertion of the He is profound. Some scholars connect it directly to the life-giving aspect of God's own name, YHWH.
Okay.
In ancient thinking, names were destiny. So by inserting this symbol of divine breath, God wasn't just renaming them, he was enabling them. It was an infusion of life-giving power, foreshadowing the miracle that would let this elderly, barren couple become fruitful.
Wow. So it elevates it from just a symbolic gesture to a metaphysical intervention. It's saying that for the promise to be fulfilled, divine power had to literally change their nature. Now, this is where we pivot to the global implications. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they all share Abraham, but they take really distinct theological paths. What are the common threads that bind them together?
Well, they're bound by 3 main things, but the most important is foundational monotheism.
Belief in one God.
One God. Whether it's Judaism's Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, or Islam's strict Tawhid, the absolute unity of God. Even Christianity, with the Trinity, anchors that concept within one divine essence.
And second, they all rely on sacred scriptures, the Torah, the Bible, the Quran. These are the sources of moral authority.
And third, you have the rituals and practices that reinforce their identity. Prayer, fasting like Yom Kippur or Ramadan, charitable giving like a tzedakah or zakat, these all define and maintain the community of faith.
But the deep theological split, the one that creates so much tension, it lies in one pivotal story, the intended sacrifice of Abraham's son.
This is the fault line. In Judaism and Christianity, the son is unequivocally Isaac. And for Christians, this act has a very specific prophetic meaning. They call it prefiguration.
Isaac as a prefiguration of Jesus. What exactly does that mean?
It means Isaac acts as a type or a shadow, pointing toward the greater reality of Christ. Isaac, the promised son, carries the wood, offers his life, but is miraculously spared.
Right.
For Christians, this foreshadows Jesus, the ultimate promised son who carried his own wood and was not spared, completing the ultimate sacrifice.
And in Islam, the narrative shifts completely.
It does. The
Yeah.
dominant historical narrative in Islam holds the son to be Ishmael. And the theological emphasis changes entirely. It's not about atonement, it's about devotion. The core message is the perfect, peaceful submission Islama, the root of the word Islam, of both Abraham and his son, to God's absolute will.
And this is where we can connect back to that initial idea of modern conflict. If Judaism and Christianity see the covenant line through Isaac, and Islam sees it through Ishmael, how does that contested heirship play out over land claims?
Well, the sources are clear that the land grant was made specifically to Abraham and his descendants through Isaac. Genesis 17 is very direct about that.
Okay.
But Islam recognizes Ishmael as a legitimate son of Abraham, and thus a rightful heir to the spiritual and, for some, the territorial claims of the covenant. When you have two global faiths claiming sole possession of the legacy based on two different sons,
It inevitably ties into political and territorial disputes over that specific land.
and it has fueled centuries of tension.
You can even see this difference reflected in their art. We looked at how Western and Islamic cultures depict this scene.
Oh, the contrast is stark. Western art, like that famous painting by Caravaggio, emphasizes the high drama, the terror on Isaac's face, the urgent intervention of the angel. It's a moment of near tragedy.
But the Islamic manuscripts are totally different.
Completely. They often show Abraham and Ishmael in a calm, peaceful landscape. Ishmael is older, bound, but waiting patiently. The core message is peace, trust, and mutual submission to God's decree.
Drama versus peace. Redemption versus submission.
That's the cue.
And the distinction gets even sharper when we look at the central divine or human figure in each religion.
Right. For Christianity, Jesus is the absolute center. The Son of God, the Messiah, the interpretive lens for the entire Hebrew Bible. For Jews, Jesus is not the anticipated Messiah. They still await a future one.
In Islam.
Islam explicitly rejects the Trinity and Jesus' divinity. He's seen as an important prophet, but Muhammad is the ultimate human figure, the seal of the prophet.
The final messenger.
And the Quran is the final uncorrupted revelation. And that final revelation, it plays a different institutional role. A defining characteristic of Islam is the intertwining of religion and governance, or Sharia.
We hear that term Sharia a lot. How is that understanding of comprehensive law different from the classical Christian concept of governance?
Sharia is understood as divine law that covers every aspect of life: social, economic, political, personal. It's not just theology, it's jurisprudence, family law, commerce. This contrasts sharply with the classical Christian concept, which is rooted in Christ's statement to render unto Caesar what is Caesar.
Which created a separation.
A crucial inherent distinction between the spiritual sphere of the church and the temporal sphere of the state. Historically, that kind of separation is alien to classical Islamic tradition. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer scale of Abraham's legacy is just stunning. It's not just history. It's a living blueprint that continues to shape global history, cultural values, and worldviews. Understanding these common roots and these divergent paths is really essential for understanding our world.
So the final question of the covenant remains. Was it fully fulfilled? The sources suggest that while some parts are seen as already fulfilled, Israel entering Canaan, Christ is the singular seed of the blessing, the complete realization is still pending.
That comprehensive realization, the thing Abraham himself never fully saw, includes the ultimate land inheritance being fulfilled in a new creation and the complete gathering of his spiritual descendants from every nation. That's still an ongoing work.
So it seems Abraham's story is really just the beginning of a world-altering drama.
Yep.
Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are undeniably linked by him, but they are not congruent. The enduring tension we see isn't just about sharing a father, but about the high stakes of claiming the right to interpret his inheritance. The tension isn't just about who receives the inheritance, but who truly upholds the immense obligation that came with it. It leaves you pondering, what does it mean for the world that the father of a multitude left behind competing heirs?
The Bible isn't just a history book. It's a living, challenging text. As you reflect on what we covered today regarding this topic, consider how this new context changes your reading of the verses. If you appreciated this breakdown, sharing it with just one friend who struggles with understanding the Bible is the best way you can support the channel. Subscribe for more, click here for your next explanation, and never stop seeking clarity. Until next time.